Good afternoon. Welcome to the JB Show on Hampton Leftists. My name is James Fauntleroy, and I have with me today a representative and developer from Panquake, Sean O'Brien. Sean, how are you doing today?
Wonderful. Happy to be here.
All right, great. So you represent the new social media app Panquake. Um, I just have a question for you. What is Panquake and like what the hell is it? And like and why are we so interested in this social media? Is it?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the chief security officer for the product, and we are pushing out some amazing stuff. Of course, there's many alternatives out there. We're aiming to be the next generation short messaging platform. We're going to replace all the Twitters and all that stuff. And we have a awesome blockchain backend, which I'm happy to talk
Mhm,
about, explain that a little bit. But I
mhm.
think more importantly, we're focusing on true freedom of information. We're focusing on decentralization. We're focusing on changing that whole paradigm,
Okay.
not having targeted advertising or any advertising, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Um, so just as what makes this what makes this different than other platforms? Because I mean, you have platforms like especially during the whole Bernie Sanders campaign, a lot of people were saying that you should go to a platform called Minotaur. They were talking about that. They were talking about MeWe. You have ones like Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat. Um, so how is this that much different than them? Can you give us a little bit more detail?
Sure. So, I mean, I've been involved in free and open source software for a long time. I've been, directly implementing a lot of these other sort of alternative social networks, the kinds of things you're talking about. We, as activists, as folks looking for a better way, right, doing something better than big tech, have been looking for a long time for a solution that can really be a serious replacement for this terrible, dodgy surveillance tech that we're using every day, right?
Hmm.
So the exciting thing about Panquake is that solutions like this don't come around very often, and when they do come around, I certainly feel, and I think a lot of folks out there, our donors feel, they need to support it.
Hmm.
Um, Panquake has a few features which these other networks don't have. The
Hmm.
first one, which I mentioned, which I'm sure your audience will be quite happy with, is we don't do any manipulation of timelines. We don't do any targeted advertising. We don't allow people to pay to boost their content. We don't have
Okay.
any sidebars with any of that stuff. There's no, weird features where I can throw a lot of money at something and boost what I'm trying to say. So that's a biggie, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but perhaps even more important, especially as we see with organizers and movements, really, big tech is stifling our ability to speak, our ability to publish, our ability to reach people and organize, and they're doing that by like shadow banning, straight up censorship sometimes, right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
But often it's just, hey, you see your follower count fall, or
Yeah.
you see your friends are suddenly booted off the network temporarily, maybe, right? But still
As
at a
yeah.
crucial part.
On
So,
on Facebook, we call it being zucked. So yeah,
okay, there you go.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah, the Zuckerberg.
yeah.
But anyway,
Well,
so how do we live this promise? Well, one of the ways we do that is via our blockchain backend. And I know
mhm,
blockchain is like one of these fancy terms that is thrown around a lot.
yeah,
Um, in our case, we mean two important things that I want to emphasize.
mhm,
The first thing is it's an immutable ledger of the publishing in the network, right? So when you have a Quake, which is what we call our short messages, that Quake is added to this ledger, and all the replies are, et cetera, et cetera. We keep real track of followers and follower counts, right? We're going to have real metrics on all of that anybody who wants to go and look can verify is real. So there's integrity in the history of the publishing in the network there. And that's a biggie. The second thing I want to emphasize is that we're not using a proof of work protocol. We're using something called proof of authority. And what that basically means is we have trusted nodes, trusted computers and users really, who are at the heart of the network. They're going to be partners from all over the world, different organizations, some of them tech activist orgs and so on. And they form the core of the network that keeps it decentralized. So we're not just like running something off some server in Sean's basement, right? And unfortunately, you know, although I think there's a lot of well-meaning folks out there who are building these other networks, the model tends to be very centralized, and we're trying to buck that trend. It's part of our promise to users. It's part of our, you know, promise of respect for users, and also longevity of the network, right? We want to build something that even potentially can outlast us, which is, you know, a big goal of ours.
Okay, so I like to get responses from the chat because this is a very interactive program that we have. One of the first questions from the chat that I would like to, Robin Duran said Mastodon was big for a while. That was actually, when I said Minotaur, I meant Mastodon. I just got the name wrong.
I kind of knew, but I didn't want to correct you, but yes.
Garrett Olson says, how is it different from WhatsApp before it was sold to Facebook?
Yeah, so these are the two questions at the core. I'll tackle the Mastodon one first. Okay. So like Mastodon, we're free and open source software. We have a commitment to releasing our source code. We will be doing that with the release of the application. We haven't done that yet, but we are very dedicated to that, and I'm very serious about it. And so like Mastodon, we're going to have our source code to be able to be audited. People will be able to contribute. You know, we'll have a community of developers that we can foster that can help us, you know, build this thing out. We also...
Is that kind of like Wikipedia, where you can have different people come in to add information?
Yeah, no, this is more about trying to get developers and, you know, folks who are interested in helping with documentation or maybe even some graphical work or extending, building things on top of our network. The folks who want to contribute to our network can just drop in and publish. It's going to be a web-based platform. You go to the website, right, panquake.com, you log in, and you can start. And I'll get into the whole subscription model soon, but it's worth noting that we have a free, basically, tier as well. Folks that can be guests in the network and participants without having to buy subscription yet. But anyway, the whole thing with Mastodon, it's federated, meaning different Mastodon nodes that people are running talk to each other. So we're going to have federation with Mastodon and other social networks that also use that same protocol, which is called ActivityPub. I'm good friends with one of the main developers, perhaps the main architect of ActivityPub. I'm very serious about making sure that she is, you know, actively involved in helping us build this thing out. So we want to make sure we are contributing to the Fediverse, and hopefully we'll be one of the largest, if not the largest node on the Fediverse. We're really going for gold with that. And the second thing, yeah, I mean, look, nobody has trust in products because they can easily be bought or swapped. And we don't have any venture capital. We're not looking for that. We have a crowdfunding model, obviously. We're not seeking any outside investment. We don't have some shady cabal of investors behind this thing. So, I mean, that's part of our trust model. But the other thing I'll say, and I think, you know, the other thing we think about a lot is censorship circumvention. You know, what happens if we have parts of our network shut down? What happens if we have hostile actors who are trying to attack us or shut us off in a specific nation or something? Part of the promise of free and open source software, and this is where it is kind of like Wikipedia, right? Part of the promise of free and open source software is that you can take that and, you know, build it somewhere else, fork it, make your own thing. And so we hope that the thing we're building, like I said, you know, it'll live for a long time with us and perhaps beyond us. That's a real promise to the community.
So from what I gather, and this is actually kind of goes in. This is Rome. This is one of my co-hosts on Fred Hampton Leftists. He asked the question, "How do we know you aren't spying on us? How can we trust you not to sell out and sell our information?" This kind of goes into accordance with, from what it sounds like, it's decentralized, meaning that it doesn't necessarily have to be based here in the United States. It can be based someplace else in another country, or it can be moved to another country. So that if the United States says, "Hey, we want the NSA to be able to monitor through your actions," you guys say, "Sorry, we're in Sweden right now. We can't do it."
Mhm.
Is that kind of what I'm gathering? Am I correct on that?
You are correct on that, and in fact, I'll do you one better. We're already in Iceland with our infrastructure, so
Okay.
we're already thinking very strongly about not being in the
Okay.
United States.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that there won't be some, decentralized folks who are mirroring stuff for, partners in the U.S. who are helping us out. Um, but it's sort of that two factor thing, right? We have the transparency of what goes into the network, the messages that people have, the conversations that people are having are in
Mhm.
that public ledger. So they are
Mhm.
public information.
Mhm.
But people are aware, obviously, that they're having public conversations.
Mhm.
But we also don't want to touch anybody's data. The only thing that is going to matter is the user handle. We're not collecting email addresses. We're not collecting phone numbers. We're coming up with clever ways to segment, compartmentalize the payment system so it's not linked to some form that has all kinds of detailed information. The profiles of the users and the user information is going to be stored on the client
Mhm.
side, meaning on the computer that the user is using. Um, and that's both to protect the user from things like you say, the NSA, but also to protect us, right? We don't want to have that stuff. And I'm a
Mhm.
very serious privacy by design advocate here. Um, you shouldn't collect information if you don't need it. And we're coming up with really clever ways that we don't need that information. We don't want it. We don't want to be looking at you.
Mm. Yeah. Um, so he asks again, he goes, "How can I trust that you're not going to sell out?" I've seen many sites like this, but I want to know, where's your heart in all this? Because it's a lot of money once you get in, uh, once you get enough people. So basically, I think what they're saying is there's going to be a huge temptation of having, once you get a lot more money, there is kind of a temptation to uh, deviate from what you want to do as far as the security of a site like this. So there's that kind of like that iffiness, and it's like there's a
How
lot
can
of
you
sites.
trust? You've been burned so many times, right?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
totally get it. Believe me. So we have a very vigilant community. I mean, the fact that we're obviously on shows like this with very savvy folks who have very strong political beliefs and understanding, um, we've got folks who are going to be very watchful of what we're doing.
Hmm.
And we're purposefully providing the transparency up front. That's one of the reasons I keep talking about the source code and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, we have a very simple subscription model. We're not
Hmm.
buying you as the product. Like I said, we don't
Hmm.
want data profiles on people. That's why we're doing a simple subscription model.
Got it.
We're also going to have what we're calling compassionate accounts, meaning, for example, you can apply because $5 a day or $5 not sorry a month. Um, Seems like a small amount, $5 a month for a service, but in a lot of places in the world, in the global south, folks who are out of work, folks who are just experiencing a rough time in their life, that is quite a lot of money. So
Yeah.
we have applications for users to get accounts. We're going to have gift accounts. A lot of people have come to us and been like, yeah, I'd pay, $10, $15, $20. And then we're going to allow those folks to basically subsidize other folks' accounts, right?
Okay.
So you're paying 20 and you're helping 3 users get on the network.
Hmm.
And then we are really dead set about folks being able to get into the network and participate for free. So there is going to be some basic functionality that folks can use in the network for free. People will be able to reply to conversations and so on and so forth without
Hmm.
having to reveal their identity to us, without having to even, provide anything. And of course, when they go through the subscription process. We just want them to pick a user handle and get on the network. That's the best we can do from a trust standpoint. We are going to try really hard, and we are trying hard now. I think you'll see if you look at the website, we have a lot of information about, our delivery meetings, which are our monthly meetings. We're going to be doing one on Tuesday, which says, hey, here's what we've done this month, right? Here's what we've done from a development standpoint. Basically, here's where the donor money is going, which we take very seriously. We hope we can build trust that way, and I hope the person asking the question will come along with us because we're really trying.
Yeah. Yep. X says it's not a lot of money. It's $5 a month once it's up. It's easier to keep receipts since everything is public. So, another question that I had, I think you may have already answered it. Well, I'll just ask the question. So, of course, you are on Fred Hampton Leftist Network right now, and you are, talking about how nobody can pay you a bunch of money so that we can advertise, which is great. But a platform, for instance, like Fred Hampton Leftists or the PSL or maybe the Green Party or something like that, how can we facilitate growth? Or like, for instance, Rome, one of my co-hosts, he does Tour for the Poor. How can he grow that platform on a site like Panquake where you don't really use advertisers? So how is that possible?
That Tour for the Poor initiative sounds awesome, and I'd like to find out more about it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, as I said, this is being built by a group of folks who, generally speaking, have activism backgrounds or at least very strong freedom of information feelings. So we've built some really cool features that we hope will not only capture the hearts and minds of organizers, but just ordinary folks. We really want this to be a network for everybody. The feature that I think is probably most interesting for the groups you mentioned, for activist organizers, even somebody who just has a community group and wants to get the information out there. We have a feature we're implementing called Quakes. So we have our Quakes, which are our short messages, and we have our Quakes, which are basically a mass amplification tool.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about Thundercats. Sorry.
Fair enough.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Hopefully we'll get some good fan art with, Lionel or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Quakes are basically earned through activity in the network. So let's say over the course of 5, 6, 7 days, I'm clicking through the network, I'm following people, I'm replying, I'm doing this stuff. It's sort of a slow trickle of building up to a Quake point. And then we have this point and we can gift it to someone else. So let's say, I want to give to any of those groups you mentioned. I want to give a Quake to them. Then they can use that Quake point to basically send a pre-scheduled message to their followers, and they say, hey, we're going to, on Tuesday, announce this big action we're doing, this big thing we're publishing, whatever it is. Would you like to opt in to participate to amplify to all your followers? And if the followers opt in, then they automatically amplify that message to all their followers. So it sort of goes through the network, propagates, and really spreads out really quickly. So right now we're fighting, right, especially in networks like Twitter, for retweets, constantly reminding people via DM, hey, we're doing this thing, make sure you push it out on Tuesday, et cetera, et cetera. This is an automated way to do that. And it also levels the playing field because, if you're a Coca-Cola or a whatever, a corporation coming in, and by the time corporations like that come in, we will be, powerful enough. And I hope that, we'll be very well established with a lot of these organizing groups. I think they'll be the first adopters. But anyway, the Coca-Colas of the world can't just come in and buy influence now. They have to be on the same level. And maybe they will earn Quakes, right, from their followers. But they don't get more power in the network than, any of these activist groups. And that kind of feature is, you have to ask why it's not in the networks we have now. It totally could be, but clearly there's some sort of I don't know, antisocial gamification going on rather than social gamification, which is really
Mhm.
what we're trying to do.
Okay. I'm seeing Garrett's Olson, his question. He said the WhatsApp question again. He said, yeah, he said, but WhatsApp is free and ubiquitous around the globe. Um, so what really is that much of a difference when it comes to WhatsApp? Um,
So we have this beautiful network, right? We're talking over it. We're able to get our message out as much as we can through this podcast, right?
mhm,
Through
mhm.
this stream.
Yeah.
But we're doing it through all these proprietary surveillance networks. WhatsApp is one of those networks. It is now owned by Facebook, which was even worse than the prior situation. Um, and it basically is buying and selling you. So although it's free, you're the product, right?
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so I think a lot of folks are obviously fed up with this. Certainly, people who are traditionally just screwed over by,
Mhm.
real world, bias are now seeing the bias in the digital world. And of course, those two
Yeah.
things are so interlinked. It's not even funny, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so yeah, so I mean, I guess my quick answer to that is first off, we're doing a social media platform here. We're not a messenger like WhatsApp. However, we would never do any of the terrible spying and profiling that WhatsApp does. Um, I'm a privacy and security trainer, and I train groups to be more private, more secure, potentially anonymous online. Right? WhatsApp is one of the worst offenders here because they provide sort of a facade because they have end-to-end encrypted messaging of the content of
Mhm.
messages. They provide a facade of privacy, but the most important data is probably not the content of your message. It's the metadata. It's the networks that you have, who you're talking to, how long you're talking to them. All of that information is extremely valuable, not only to these private corporations, but also to surveillance services, the NSA, as you mentioned, and so on.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and there's a lot of alternatives in that space that are hopefully going to replace WhatsApp. We want to be part of sort of that wave of being very privacy and security conscious and really living up to our values.
Yeah.
So anyway, we very much hope that folks are doing doing better than WhatsApp as much as possible. And
Yeah.
if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm always happy to, give recommendations, or even for your specific case, if you have a use case, especially if you're under duress, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Cool. And I'll put your YouTube handle in the description after we're done. Um, so just and a lot of my audience, they're very technology astute. They're very politically astute.
Hmm.
And as we all know, just because a website is free doesn't mean it is free. Um, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all these different sites, you are the product. And so because you are the product, that means they sell your information. You could type a word in, and then next thing you know, you'll go to a completely different site, and then there'll be an advertisement for that product because they're literally looking at your data and they're seeing exactly what they have to cater it to you so that you'll buy it. But also, um, government entities also use this information as well because um, safety, I'll put that in air quotes, and you guys know why. They want to, keep an eye on you, which completely goes against some some of our privacy laws in the Constitution. So, just for anybody who's watching that isn't aware, you are the product when it comes to any one of these. So, because Facebook doesn't charge you a subscription fee, your data is the subscription fee. So, just wanted to put that out there. If you're on Twitter, Snapchat, what have you. So, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go
And
ahead.
I just would like to add to that as well. A lot of folks now, at least in the U.S. And some other places, where they may feel like they'll come to a workshop I'm doing or workshops with other trainers I talk to, and they'll be like, well, why does it matter, right? Why does it matter? Everybody's spying on me, so who cares?
Mhm.
We're starting to see the beginnings of, and we will see it sort of snowballing soon, really, exponentially. Um, all that data that's been collected, all those social graphs that have been built, all of that merging of the digital world and the physical world, as I said earlier, that's going to have a real effect on our autonomy,
Mhm.
our ability to move, our ability to speak, our ability to speak to certain people, our
Yeah.
ability to get a job, to have any social mobility, such as it is, which is, already bad enough.
Yeah.
All of that is going to be affected by this information.
Yeah.
Um, and we are actively seeing that now. I'm sure you're quite aware during the pandemic, it's really escalated. Um,
Yeah.
we're going to see powerful folks who try to shut down free flow of information and
Mhm.
instead keep shoving us into these networks where we are forced to volunteer information about ourselves,
Yeah.
which then allows us to be further just, shoved aside, marginalized, whatever, locked up
Yeah.
in some cases, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes kind of in accordance with what that DVE, domestic violence extremist, that they said. And if you're somebody like myself that's anti-capitalist, then it's like, well, you need to report these people. And it's like, no, we're not extremists in that way. We're not terrorists. Okay, we just believe that capitalism is an evil, and we want to go through the correct means in order to end it. But at the same time, you have certain sites that monitor things like this, and they, allow the government entities to monitor things like this. And this is something that is basically, in a sense, opening the mail. But even though we technically allowed it through terms and conditions, they made the terms and conditions so what's the word I want to use? So in kind of like an encrypted language,
Yeah.
some legal
Impossible
lingo.
to read, way too
So,
long,
so
etc.
then it gets to a point where we're just like, okay, fine, whatever, because we just want to use the service. And so then we accidentally, they manufactured our consent in a way to use this service. And so, um, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I do want to go back to the chat.
Mhm.
Yep, X asked, will there be multiple link box options under the user bio to advertise? I know there's a link tree, but people don't always know or trust that. Um, in what multiple, I mean, like three descriptions. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but
So this person is, I believe, talking about having multiple spaces in their little profile area,
hmm.
rather than having to just provide one URL that describes them.
Okay.
Um, yeah, at the moment, we're not planning for that. I'm not
Hmm.
sure exactly what we're going to do there. We've got devs who are working on the front end. If you're interested in that and really think it's something we should be doing, please let us know. Obviously, now I know about it, which is great. Um, we are trying, at least early on, as all, all
Hmm.
networks, all big, endeavors like this, we're trying to be simple and deliver on the things we're promising first.
Hmm.
But certainly we want to have, the voice of our users heard and stuff like this. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. A lot of other networks, one of the reasons that options aren't provided or options are limited in a certain way is because what's really going on is sort of a cat and mouse, or I guess I should say it's almost like you're running a rat running a maze, really.
Hmm.
Um, you'll find in Twitter that you have to end up opening tons of different tabs, clicking on somebody's profile to do something, going back to somebody's profile to retweet something, but it moved in the timeline. So now you're scrolling to, all that stuff. There is more purpose to it than it may seem at first.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. So often the clicks and where you're clicking are tracked. That information is given to advertisers as proof of engagement, as they call it.
Hmm.
So now they can say, I clicked 7 times, Sean clicked 7 times on this thing, and Sean is from this demographic. Therefore, we advertise this. And if you want to get on that train and advertise, here's how much it's going to cost you, Gillette or whoever.
Hmm.
That's the kind of thing that's going on often.
Hmm.
And we want to take feature requests, obviously, and not do any of that. Not having advertising, not building in on an ad market, not building on this, really monopolistic market too, right? Because keep in mind, it's controlled by these same networks, which can implement these features.
Hmm.
Not having any of that allows us to really listen to folks. So yeah, please let us know. The profile is going to be slightly longer than Twitter's. We're not going to have some bizarre verification scheme. We're going to have what we're calling a self-verification, or just it should be normal verification, where you provide information to your followers. Hey, this is my website, and then they can verify and say, hey, yeah, this is Sean.
Okay.
We're not trying to go past that, because once you get into all that complicated stuff, you have to collect information about people you should never collect, right? So
Yeah.
Twitter's collecting passports and who the heck knows what. And B, it just gets into territory that's too, labyrinthine and ridiculous, right? We don't want
Hmm.
to be the arbiters of whether you're you. Your followers should be the arbiters of whether you're you, and they can tell us if you're a fake. And then, as I probably should underline a little bit, we are going to have moderation. It's not going to be completely anything goes. So, if somebody's impersonating you, if they're harassing you, we
Okay.
are going to have steps with stuff like that.
Okay.
What we're not going to have is misinformation labels and all that other craziness that's going on right now in,
Okay.
in
Because
other
this,
networks.
you basically kind of answered Robin's question. She said free speech is so vital, so is safety. So how will Pancake Quake handle trolls, stalkers, etc., while keeping a robust free speech policy? So you said you're going to have mods to be able to do that as well. Okay.
Yeah, and two things I want to mention there. And I've run, relatively large social networks. I ran something that actually predated Mastodon by
Hmm.
quite a bit, called Friendica. That's similar-ish software, and I had thousands of users in there, and we had our issues. You have to deal with these kinds of problems. We're serious about having human moderation, first off. So we're not going to have some AI thing that just auto moderates and removes something based on keyboards. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Good.
uh,
Okay.
the other thing we're going to have is we're going to have, obviously, that ledger. That's where, blockchain is really powerful this way, because you can just check. And so we can have a note in there that says moderated because of reason X.
Okay.
And the other thing, which we, of course, still need to work on and figure out the nuts and bolts of, we're going to have some sort of appeal process. We're not just going to blanket, get rid of people and not respond, which tends to be what these other networks do. So,
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I like what this Turkey Day said. A financial analyst says he tells his kids anything that is free will cost you more.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much true. Um,
Yeah,
let
I
me
mean, the
see.
thing that I emphasize with folks too is, like, again, going back to this autonomy thing, rather than thinking about it in a transactional, right now, here,
Hmm.
decision making. Um, Folks are making decisions now, especially, teens and so on, that can follow them literally for the rest of their lives. So yeah, when that person says it could cost you more, yeah, it could, totally. You don't know what kind of impacts it's going to have. You may never actually know that the decision someone made about you, like I said, to reject you from a job, to reject you from a school, who knows? I mean, we may end up with something that's akin to social scoring, social
Hmm.
credit scores.
Hmm.
All that kind of stuff is going to impact people in ways that you don't even know. And it's happening now. This is part of the AI thing, and the reason that we're serious about not having that in our network. So,
Yeah. So I just want to ask this question. This is actually from me. Now, there there is kind of a bit of a fear that I think that might be in the back of the developer's mind. Is there a fear of being just a niche platform because it's subscription based instead of free, free like other large platforms. Like you feel like, some people, a lot of the more people who are concerned about privacy will probably be interested in this, but it'll still be kind of obscure, you know, as far as its notoriety among the masses. And I mean, this is something that I think that should be placed way above,
Mhm.
the Twitters and the Facebooks and, the Snapchats. But because it's not free, then people will look at it and go, I don't have money for that. You know what I mean? And I know you kind of answered the question about the affordability,
Sure.
but you know what I mean? So that's the only thing I'm I'm asking is there a fear that is going to just kind of be in the background, you know what I mean, on the bottom shelf, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Yeah, so there's a few things to say about that. Of course, we're obviously very hopeful that we're going to have mega impact, right?
Mhm.
But the first thing I just want to clarify, and I think once we get the beta rolling and folks really see the front end and see how it's going to work, their fears will be a little assuaged this way.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
this platform is something you're going to be able to drop into. So you'll be able to go to a link, panquake.com, or go to a link that somebody shares you to a Quake, or go to a link to something called a Pan Quake, which is a stack of Quakes.
Mhm.
Um, and then you'll be able to read that. You'll be able to, scroll through and see what people are doing and having the conversation. So we're not doing a hard paywall on the front end.
Mhm.
Um, the second thing is we're going to have limited functionality like replies, like liking content, where you can be a participant, which is still the free tier, right? But now you're actually having interaction in the network.
Yeah.
Um, and then if folks want to subscribe, they can subscribe. So we are trying to make sure that, if I give this to my mom or my grandmother or something, they can start getting in there and getting the feel of it and understanding, how the network works and interacting with the content before they take the plunge and get a subscription.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we're hoping that'll help a lot. The other thing is, I think the writing is on the wall with the subscription model. We have seen already, for example, I know I keep harping on Twitter, but there's obviously, in the streaming world, everybody's paying subscriptions for stuff. But with Twitter, they are now introducing a subscriber tier for specialty features.
Mhm.
We'd like to think that they were paying attention to us and responding
Mhm.
to that,
Yeah.
but I think really it probably is also just part of this larger wave where even the big tech platforms are starting to realize that this data profiling and this spying and this ad economy that they've created um, is not going to last forever. They're getting
Mhm.
serious challenges from regulators for the first time. They're getting serious challenges from all other alternative platforms, right? Um, we're going to do our best. We're going to make a splash. We're going to aim for, the average person, so to speak. I hate using that average user term, but we're doing a lot of testing. We're making sure that this thing is beautiful and fun and cool, right? We want it to be something that you're happy to be in, not something that you're doing out of some guilt because of privacy. Oh, I shouldn't be contributing to this surveillance network. The tools that are successful in the privacy and security space are the ones that are able to kind of say, hey, yeah, we have awesome privacy and security, but check out these cool features, check out this fun way to interact. And that's why we're kind of building in things like I said, Thunderquake. And I can talk about some of the other features too, which I think are pretty cool. But we are doing things in a way that is definitely not just about being a more private network. We want to have some really fun stuff.
Okay. This is just a funny one from FHL co-host Rome. He he asked, "What the f does Panquake mean? What did that name come from?" Like, Rome, he's a trip. I love my brother. He's funny. But yeah, what is what? Because I'm asking the same question because that's if you look at the title of the video, it's International House of Panquakes. So
Yeah,
I'm
well,
like,
that's what we
what does that
want.
mean? You know?
That's exactly what we want. The name is obviously original and hard to forget once you hear it. So I think on that level, I mean,
Okay.
you're going to remember it, right? So it works very well that way. Um, but yeah, so Quakes are the messages, and we want, everybody has to come up with a name for messages. Mastodon calls them toots, and I don't have to go into that, but a lot of the folks who get into Mastodon make fun of that because it sounds like bodily noises.
Yeah.
We have our Quakes, and the key functionality for folks, beyond these other amplification tools, are panquakes, which means that you can stack, like pancakes, a bunch of quakes into a beautiful thread that you can share with one easy link to anybody. So that's like real serious functionality for the writers out there, for the activists out there, for the people trying to point to some, here's a news story, here's what I think about it, here's what this other person thinks about it, here's why this interesting reply, this adept reply to what we were talking about. You can stack all that together in a panquake, and then you can share that in a single link anywhere on the internet. So that's really the core of the network, and is going to be really fun. I can't wait for that because I hate writing threads in other networks, 1 out of 7, 5 out of 7, whatever. But also, I mean, this is much freer than that, right? It's going to allow people to really tell a story. Here's what happened today at, this action we did, at this meeting we had, here's what's going on internationally. Here's something you may not have heard about. It's going to allow users to really tell a story and do it in a really fruitful way, rather than that sort of like disjointed conversation you can see on other social networks. I keep harping on Twitter, but of course Facebook is as bad or worse that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So going back to the chat, hold on. Oh, here it is. Okay. Down the line, will there be a customization option, sort of like MySpace had back in the day, to make your profile unique?
Yeah, this is great. And this is really interesting because we get a lot of questions about this. I'm a huge fan of customizing spaces. I
Hmm.
started doing my old websites when I was like 14 on GeoCities, and I had the most god awful thing to look at, right? With GIFs in the background and stars and who the hell knows what. But, but there's fun in that, right? And that's part of the early internet kind of spirit we do want to embody. I do say that, again, in the beginning, we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. But I expect over time we will have more and more customization. So
Oh, okay.
the quick answer is no. I do want to say that we're going to have multiple themes. We're going to have, a dark theme, a high contrast theme. We're going to have multiple different colors along that sort of panquake. You see the orange and the purples and so on. So we're going to make it definitely prettier, definitely funkier, definitely cooler than that bland blue whatever that the rest of the tech world has fallen into. So
Yeah, because androids are, colorblind. Um,
well, there you go.
was that a dig at Mark Zuckerberg? You bet your ass it was. Um, there was, oh man, there's some great questions here. Um, he said, Rome says people are saying that $5 will stop the trolls, but forget Facebook and Twitter will put money behind fake pages. How do you deal with this? Um, I think you kind of answered that. Did you kind of answer that earlier? I don't know. I was
Yeah,
just,
that's okay. We on multiple levels are trying to answer these questions, so there's actually a little more to say about it. Sure.
Mhm.
So again, we've really put a ton of thought in this, listened to a lot of folks, and got a lot of folks involved with their feedback early on. The troll
Mhm.
problem's a huge issue, right?
Yeah.
Botnets and so on and so forth. Um,
Mhm.
One of the ways you can limit it, sure, is by making sure that there's some sort of cost there. But another thing you can do is you can have the network be opt-in. So like we and I mean in general, right? As sort of the background ethos, you're not going to see content unless you actively go looking for it, searching for cats or whatever, pancakes or whatever.
Cats.
Or
Yeah.
cats, of course. Although pancake recipes, I don't know.
Yeah,
But anyway,
of course.
but yeah, so you're going to find that content obviously if you search for it, or you're going to find that content if you're following someone and they're publishing it. But we're very serious about not shoving stuff into your timeline that's followers of followers and just trying to get you to engage with someone you have no idea who they are. Doesn't completely solve the troll problem. Obviously, we'll still have to do things like, monitoring and moderating and having really the users at the core of the moderation, right? We want people to flag content rather than us, like I say, this crazy AI crap that's going on everywhere else. But yeah, look, all social networks are going to have the pitfall of the troll. And we're going to do our best to really be serious about it. Building in these kind of design features at the core of the network makes it easier to sort of cut out a lot of the stuff that just goes on now, where you spin up 1,000 Twitter users and you pile on somebody's comment. And, the cost does help a little bit with that too. So, yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I'm trying to try to pronounce this name. R. Marbiton 8. I'm sorry if I messed that up. It basically is credibility by association. That's what it sounds like in some ways.
Yeah, and we want to be credible through our actions as building the network. So I don't know exactly what the comment means, but I hope that that's about the verification process, maybe.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah, and cats and pancakes, a sticky situation. I agree. Let me see. I think did I have another? Oh no. Okay. But yeah. I'm just trying to look through the chat to see if there's any more interesting questions. Oh, good question. When is it up and running? So that's basically one of the end all be all questions. It's like, where is it? Because I can't find it on Google and Google's Play Store. So
yeah, so obviously we're not up and running yet. We're still funding. We have our crowdfunding round. That's gogetfunding.com/panquake, or you can just go to panquake.com to find that. We're going to have a staggered rollout. So the easier, the quick answer is, okay, the faster we reach our crowdfunding goals, the faster we'll get this thing out there. We are making sure we're putting the funding for this network into real serious development work, not fluff projects, right? And so we do, in these delivery meetings, we make sure we have testimonials from the folks working on the project. We make sure we're transparent with you about how many devs we have working who are, full-time, how many of them are part-time volunteers, and so on and so forth. And the more of those full-time folks we can get on board, the better. Just like with everything else, we want real people, So anyway, we're going to be rolling out a beta first, then we'll have a 1.1. Then we'll have what we call our early access, which is the pre-public release, and then we have the full public release. We're hoping to do that, on a pretty quick timeline here. We do have applications open now for the beta. So you can actually, apply to be part of that trusted core. I was talking about the first 5,000 users on the network. And the quicker we get there, the quicker we'll get to the other pieces is usually what I say. Our current round of funding, is about 82% funded. And then after that, we have some goals that we want to reach to try to really push this out and build the infrastructure we're going to need for the public release. After we get that 82 to 100%, that will be for the beta. And then the next round of funding is going to be the final round that we need for moderators, for, technical support staff, for, the support people you need to contact, right? We don't want to be some opaque, monolithic Silicon Valley thing, and you can never contact anybody if you're having trouble. All of that stuff is going to be funded by the final round. So once we finish this round, then do the next round, that'll be the public release. But after this round is done, we will have what we need to launch the beta. So if you're interested, please, go and apply for the beta. The reason I say apply is we're vetting very carefully the first folks we have in the network to make sure that they're not trolls or bots or, whatever. And that's because the trust model I was talking about for that blockchain network, the proof of authority, relies on the core of the network to be real, genuine people. So we want to make sure that's true and not, some, I don't know, NSA botnet, right?
Yeah.
So,
I'm not exactly sure what this means from Justin Anderson. Are you still doing access keys? I'm not exactly sure what that is.
So we have two things going on right now, and it's probably a little confusing, so I'll clarify. When we launched the initial announcement for Panquake, which was end of January last year, we had something called early access, and folks can basically get an early access code and then provide that code when they're signing up and be part of what we're calling the pre-public, the early access to the network. That code is like, a passphrase basically that they just provide to us so that we can verify that they actually went through the process. We also have this thing now to apply for the beta. So the person asking or anybody interested can do either or both. We obviously can't squeeze everybody in for the beta. So the folks that don't end up in the beta, a lot of them will end up in the early access tier, and they'll be some of the first folks on the network. But I really think once we get the beta running, once we get those users in there, once we figure out, as I said, the nuts and the bolts, from there, it's figuring out those other pieces, which are essential for an organization that's well functioning and really functioning for the users. But most of the serious technical work will be out of the way. And certainly I'm going to be digging in full time every day, and already am, really trying to solve some of these problems around privacy, security, and coming up with serious solutions. Once that groundwork is out of the way, the rest of it is, logistics. So we'll get there.
Okay. Danny asks, think it'll be available before 2022?
I think so. Yes. I don't want to promise, but I think so. I think on the trajectory we're on right now, we'll certainly have the beta out before then. But, as far as launching the full public release, it's hard to tell. One of the things that I'm sure folks watching the project have seen, we're already, facing some challenges with folks who I think don't necessarily want us getting up and running. We've had some issues with PayPal, for example, where people were donating via PayPal and the money was never dispersed to the project. So then we eventually were able to, after many weeks of trying to figure out what the heck was going on and basically arguing with PayPal over it, we then refunded to those, but obviously we can't recoup those donations. We just want to make sure that as much as possible, we make sure the money goes back to the people who donated and it was sitting in limbo with PayPal. So stuff like that does happen. We've seen, some pretty serious censorship attempts already of either, high-profile folks involved with the project or messages we've sent out. As a security person, I'm, responsible for the infrastructure we have now, the websites, the sign-up process, and so on. We have DDoS attacks pretty regularly. In the beginning, we certainly had a huge deluge of them. They actually brought down, not just our infrastructure, but infrastructure that our people on the ground, our hosts in Iceland, their entire setup, basically. So the point is, there are going to be challenges on that front as well. And we hope that means, if you see those kinds of challenges, then you're doing the right thing, right?
Yeah.
But who knows, before the full release, I'm sure there will be more challenges. And that's why I say, the support for this project is about, really supporting something that's going to be revolutionary, and I think will have a massive, effect on conversations around the internet. We already, of course, are making waves, and we're barely out of the gate. So we'll continue to do that, but everything's a struggle. So
Okay. Another question: how do you validate humans? I know you can't do DNA sequencing, but how do you validate that a person is a person instead of a bot?
yeah, so for the beta application, basically we ask you to give us 3 handles that you would like to use, your first choice, second choice, third choice when you get into Panquake. And then we ask for some sort of social media profile or handle so that we can just basically take a look at it. And we have humans who are doing that, so we're doing our best. That's pretty much the only way you can do it. So we're doing it the old-fashioned way. Anybody who pretends to be doing it better than that is not doing it better than that. They're probably doing it worse than that. But yeah, so we take a look and we use our best judgment, and we've been around a long time. We're certainly not born yesterday. So
yeah. I'm looking at this is the second time he's asked this question, so he must really wanted it to be asked. How will
Sure.
the left versus right drama be handled by the moderators when something that's reported as harassment is not, but instead just a sharing of factual information or a blunt statement? So I guess it's kind of like you know, you'll say something that's factual, but
Mhm.
then you'll have some bad faked actors that are on that will report it, and you may even have multiple people report it, even though it's a factual information. So how do you, you know, how do you handle that, or how would that be handled?
Well, certainly we have very atomized and sort of polarized political sphere in general right now. We are very serious about allowing a wide swath of the political spectrum on there. A lot of the folks currently involved in the project and high-profile folks like myself in the project, or Susie Dawson, who I'm sure you know. We're left-leaning, but we want to make sure we have right voices on there as well, and also mainstream, quote unquote, apolitical voices on there as well. So we want to be very careful about not drawing ideological barriers around the conversation. Free flow of information is really, really important. These kinds of conversations are going to be a little tricky, but we'll have a multi-step moderation process. We're not just going to outright ban people. We're going to do our best is basically the best answer I can give you right now. It can be, though, I will say, sometimes folks, even if they're well-meaning, may pile on. And drawing that line is going to be difficult, but it's difficult for everybody. What I can say is we're going to be sincere about it. We're taking a serious look at something called the Santa Clara Principles, which is something the Electronic Frontier Foundation puts out. That's basically sort of like how to best moderate, their recommendations for it. I've been looking at some stuff that the Berkman Klein Center has been putting out. That's at Harvard. They're doing recommendations for how moderation could be done better on social networks and so on. I think we'll have some kind of advisory board to help with some of the tougher decisions, and we'll make sure we have freedom of speech advocates on there and are serious and transparent about it. But beyond that, I can't give much more detail. It can be tough, but what you can bet is it's not going to be Sean doesn't like this or Sean hates pineapple pizza, so don't talk about it. That's not what it's going to be.
Okay. All right. So, I think we're coming up on the hour. So I just want to thank you, for coming on and explaining about Panquake and getting some of these, these questions. And You know, um, I just um, I'm looking at my co-host Rome. His last question. This is kind of a doozy, but you know what? It's important. He said, "What about sex workers? Will we have a place on your platform like Twitter does for OnlyFans?" You know, because there's a lot of people who they may have, for instance, their own type of work that they do that is interpersonal, just like sex workers do. Um, will that be something that's allowed? And also, what's the age, cutoff for a platform like Panquake, things like that.
Some of these things we're still figuring out. The one thing you can be sure of, we're not going to be banning someone because of their profession.
Okay.
And I certainly do consider sex work a profession.
Hmm.
It may be that we allow certain types of nudity and certain types of more graphical content, basically say, hey, there's other parts of the internet for that. I don't think we've fully come to consensus on that, and we'd love to hear from you. So this is why questions like this are really important.
Okay.
But yeah, one of the things I will say is, obviously stuff like actual, child sexual abuse stuff and so on. That's hard no, moderate it, get rid of it. Illegal stuff in that vein, atrocious stuff, heavy gore, things like that. We'll have to do moderation of. And that's a difficult question, especially with human mods, right? We also think very seriously about our workers, and we want to make sure that we're not exposing them to things that can cause,
Hmm.
stress and so on. Right now, in these other networks, this problem is quote unquote solved either by artificial intelligence or by outsourcing to the global south, basically paying
Hmm.
people way below a living wage and
Yeah.
forcing them to basically go through atrocious imagery. We're not going to be 8chan or 4chan or any of that. We're very serious about not doing that. But where exactly we draw the line with nudity, graphical imagery, and so on, we're still forming that.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
certainly, no reason to discriminate against someone because of their profession, and I don't even see why we would.
Hmm.
We're also not keeping this opt-in kind of thing, right? We're not going through everybody's images by default. We're not going to just have some queue where we're watching all of it. It is going to rely on some sort of flagging by other users. So,
Hmm.
you know, um, there is no intent to pull an Apple here and to scan all your stuff.
Of course, yeah, because Apple is
Yeah,
basically saying that they're going to start going inside your phone to monitor your stuff instead of it being inside the cloud. So that's a whole another story.
sure.
But yeah, it's kind of like using your users as partially the moderators themselves. So it's like that. And
Communities, right? We want to have real communities online. And again, I keep harping back. We've learned a lot of lessons over the last 20-ish years, but I really do think there were some really good and beautiful parts about the earlier internet, the earlier web.
Mhm.
And we want to capture that a little more. We want people to
Okay.
really be part of this. So
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. That combination of users and moderators on our end is really going to be, key. So
I got you. I got you. So it's taking less AI out and putting more humans in. Okay.
that's right.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Sean, for being on with me today. And I already put the link to Panquake in the description. Also, it's been shared in the chat. But excuse me, if you want to check it out, just go to panquake.com and give it a look yourself. And if you have any questions, then I will put the handle to Sean in the link below, in the description below. And I just want to thank you for being with us.
And if I have one more quick plug that's related to the project,
Sure.
we also have launched a news service, basically, that rounds up the biggest censorship and big tech and surveillance stories, et cetera, of the week, called Talk Liberation. And that's a
Hmm.
Substack, talkliberation.substack.com. It's not paywalled, so it's optional, paid subscription. And we're going to be working on some cool investigative reports on there shortly. So if you folks want to support the project and get that awesome content, you can go out to talkliberation.substack.com, subscribe to that. That money goes towards Panquake. So
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sean. It's so nice to meet you again.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.